founder and chairman, African Initiative for Governance, Mr. Aigbeje Aiki Mokode. All the way from Kampala, Uganda, I'd like to welcome the Executive Director, Kampala City Authority, Dr. Jennifer Musisi. And then finally, the Executive Vice Chairman, Ibadan School of Government and Public Policy, Dr. Tunji Olaokwa is here. I'd like to welcome you. And also the Managing Partner, Compliance Professionals PLC, Mrs. Ifako Omoguyokaro. So we'll be kicking off with an introductory remark by the founder and chairman of African Initiative for Governance. Please join me as I welcome Mr. Aigbeje Aiki Mokode.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Let me congratulate the Nigerian Economic Summit Group leadership and management for, as usual, sustaining what has been, for Africa, a beacon of what can happen when the private sector and the public sector work together towards making a country great again, to borrow from a man that, or to make a country great. And notice that my name plate has been taken away. That's because you have a very strict chairman, Mr. Aso Igodalo, who knows how my surname is spelled. I noticed there was a typo, and then I saw him ordering somebody, take it away, let Ignos see it. But your search for perfection certainly holds through in everything that is taking place here. Well done. Now, many people have asked me, look, Ig, we know you as a finance person. We associate you with banking. And since you left banking around 2013, when we see you publicly and we see your activities, etc., you tend to be very, very much tied with the issue of governance. What has happened? And what is your interest in governance? What are you doing in governance? And it starts like this. And you will permit me when I go into my time of birth shortly. But I think that we hold these truths self-evident, that as far as Nigeria is concerned, from the 60s right up till the 70s, Nigeria was reputed for a very high quality of governance. In fact, described as far as the Commonwealth was concerned, apart from the UK, probably running the very best administrative systems in the Commonwealth. And as a result, you saw that when you look at Professor Lewis's slides, you find that in several respects, when you look at economic outputs, economic concerns, Nigeria ranked 1, 2, 3 in many things in the world at this point in time. Indeed, I read in Lee Kuan Yew's book that he came to Nigeria to visit Nigeria when he was crafting the Singapore strategy, because he felt that the greatest competition he would find actually for a strategy was in Nigeria. This is based on the people he went to school with in Oxford and Cambridge, I think he went to Cambridge, and so on. And from the mid-70s, we began to suffer a significant decline in economic indicators. And my thesis is that there is a high correlation between economic output and performance and the quality of governance. And I think that it's no coincidence that as Nigeria began this, actually a massive underinvestment in its public sector, in its public service in terms of talent, the outcomes are clear. And when I say a massive underinvestment, I think I will leave that to our panel to really examine in detail, even though I will be contributing. So my own story starts as a young man. I think probably I was 5, so a child, let's say, young child. I was 5, and this was 1971. And my abiding memory of a great university, and I've been to universities all over the world. Today, my abiding memory of a great university, what a great university campus looks like, how you would describe it, actually comes from the first time I visited University of Ibadan with my mother. And she went to visit a friend who was doing a postgraduate degree. As you know, at that time, several people all over the world came to University of Ibadan and other universities, well, the 2 other leading universities at the time, to study. And I remember the facilities we ate in the cafeteria. I remember the swimming pool, walking past it and looking at this diving board. And since then, I've visited universities all over the world, and no university I've visited has shifted my idea of thought that great universities could be defined by University of Ibadan. What I'm saying to you basically is that when you look at the things we did in Nigeria around education, around entertainment, around infrastructure, these were standards that the world looked up to, and we got the benefit from. So this investment in whether the leadership itself or those who are tasked with the act of administration that took place in Nigeria, we got the benefit of it. Unfortunately for us, as we began to underinvest, a new philosophy around how you administer institutions, government or otherwise, came into being. We moved from the etymology of the word bureaucracy is a French word that speaks to a rather hierarchical administration of an institution. Bureaucracy also applies both to the public and private sector. So the world began to move to a more entrepreneurial management style, a more entrepreneurial leadership style, and train people and develop people who will run institutions that way. Unfortunately, this coincided with the time when we stopped training and developing people in the public service to lead us properly. Okay? And we started increasing the amount of training that we gave to the private sector. So the private sector began to improve at a very dramatic rate, whilst the public sector, I'm talking about governance, began to, if you like, either stay where it was or, to be honest, regress. And I'll give you a simple example. When you point your finger at the public sector and you speak to things and you look at certain outcomes such as corruption, inefficiency, service delivery, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to mention the institution, but if I won't, but it's a bank. One of Nigeria's leading banks can be described thus. As the leadership team, I'm not sure if Dr. Oba Otudeko is here, as the leadership team that Dr. Oba Otudeko and others brought into that institution, you would visit a branch, and in the branch, you would find a branch manager who has 2 wives that he married amongst the staff. And lunchtime is a family affair in the, that is a bank. And so when you ask tally number, you're sleeping in the, you then begin to understand why it was such an atrocious level of service. I would hasten to argue, therefore, that private sector institutions, or rather non-public institutions in Nigeria at the time, were probably worse, or than our public administrative systems. However, huge investment in that institution. Huge, so much so that if you go, those who are born today, and if I say, go to that bank and see that bank, see the systems, the customer orientation, the performance management systems, etc., it's as a result of several decades of investment. So I looked at this, and I looked at this reality, and I said, well, fine, I can just sit down and, like every Nigerian, start to throw stones at those in public service and complain about the symptoms of what is truly the problem, which is the underinvestment in talent. Or perhaps I can begin to shift the narrative by stepping up as a private citizen and committing my resources, times, and energies to creating a system whereby I can signal to the world that Nigerians no longer accept the status quo and are now ready to invest so that their public sector can be competitive, so that it can be performance-oriented, so it can be service delivery-oriented. And we started with scholarships, we started with fellowships. We intend to build a world-class facility to create wonderful Nigerians who will work for the public service just as wonderful Nigerians work in the private sector. That's the story, and that's why I'm here. Today, I'm privileged to share a panel with women of courage. I said women of courage, not that the men don't have courage, but what you will find, I will tell you, is that reform requires a number of human characteristics, not just technical attributes, one of which is courage. And in all honesty, it's a very lonely thing to be one of the 10 or 20% who are going to take on, whether it's corruption or whatever it is that we think is a negative outcome of leadership. It's very, very, very lonely thing. And you know, I listened to the interplay between the Vice President and Professor Woods, and she asked the question, how many of us, the first question, how many of us think that a less corrupt Nigeria is good for us? And I know how we feel. Obviously, the answer is probably 100% of us know. But the measure of our despondency, the measure of our frustration is the cause why we didn't raise our hands. And every time that we don't raise our hands to support that lone crusader who is pushing reform, we aren't helping them. I hope that today, through the NESG and those in this room, particularly the panelists, courageous women and courageous men, that we will begin to change that narrative. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Mr. Impunity for allowing us access to his inner thoughts, especially on governance. Let's appreciate him one more time. And very quickly, we'll now invite the head of service to give us a background and overview of the 2017 to 2020 Federal Civil Service Strategy and Implementation Plan. Please welcome Mrs. Winifred Oyoita.
Good afternoon, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think the protocols had all been established earlier today. And I'm really happy and, would I say, delighted that I've been invited to speak at this very, very important forum as a panelist here at the 24th Nigerian Economic Summit Group meeting. I want to start by saying that any government that wants or is desirous of having its programs and policies fully implemented and enjoyed by the populace definitely must have a very highly functional civil service. If I say public service, but especially civil service. And it is a fact that has been established globally that there is a direct correlation between a very efficient and effective civil service and a very highly productive and high-ranking economic output of that country. But where we have problems with the civil service, then it will definitely affect the economy of that country. And that is really the truth of where we find ourselves in Nigeria. And it's a situation that has reached the level where this administration has decided and giving full support to the leadership of the civil service to go into full-ranging reforms. Now, when I took over in January 2016 as the head of civil service of the Federation, when I was confirmed, I realized that I had taken over a crop of very, very disillusioned set of people who didn't have much hope and who definitely could not put in their best into the service and, of course, whatever programs and policies of government. And I sat with my team and I said, okay, we have a problem. We don't have confidence in ourselves, and the Nigerian population doesn't have confidence in the civil service. But we cannot continue weeping and gnashing our teeth. We have to work to bring ourselves out of these doldrums. And we need to find the solution from within ourselves. This time around, we would not wait for foreign donors or foreign partners or other government agencies in the public service. We have to find a solution ourselves. And that is how I want to say that the Federal Civil Service Strategy and Implementation Plan 2016 to 2020 evolved. It is an internally generated reform. And what I mean internally generated is that it comes from within the service. It is homegrown. It has been bought into by the civil service as a whole and all the unions. I think that is the platform for the success that we are beginning to enjoy. Now, we believe that we have to start on a new ethos to look at a service that we can create, a service that is efficient, productive, incorruptible, and citizen-centered. Because these were the four things that apparently were lacking in the service. We had been accused of inefficiency, being highly unproductive, high rate of corruption, and extremely selfish. So we needed to turn around the image of the service. And how were we going to go about this? We realized that we need to have certain goals that we would stand on. And those four goals were: one, to develop and institutionalize an epic civil service to change the culture and the mindset of civil servants, to develop and implement, also institutionalize an enterprise content management system. Because we realized that great part of the inefficiency in the service is that everything was being done manually. And we needed to change around the way we do things to get into the 21st century, to change our record-keeping systems, our operations, and we needed to do that to become more digital. Then thirdly, we had to also change the orientation of the service and what people see in the service, to develop an entrepreneurial culture and commercial orientation in the service. For so long, the civil service has been seen as a cost center. We don't bring anything to the table. So what happens was that at each budget session, our votes keep getting cut, training gets cut, overheads get cut, everything gets cut, because the question is, what are they doing anyway? Why do they even need that much money? So we have to decide to, in all the MDAs, look for that commercial aspect in your mandate that you can use to generate revenue for government, to make us more relevant to government. And I'm happy that my friend and sister, Ifweko, is here, and she's going to tell us a lot about how she was able to move the FIRS from just being a drain on government to the success story that it is today. And it is a very relevant agency in government of today. So we said this is what we need to do for the general civil service, to change the orientation of things and how we do things, and make ourselves relevant, productive, economically productive to government. Then, of course, the fourth goal is a goal which all civil servants look forward to, and that is to improve the benefits package for civil servants. I think the issues have been so seriously discussed in so many fora, and even this morning, His Excellency also mentioned it, that it's actually a fact that the civil service needs to have a total regeneration of its benefit packages. And we are working on that already, not just in terms of pay, but also other forms of monetary and non-monetary incentives. Now, based on these four goals, we developed our strategy plan. But in doing this, I would like to go to the very first slide. Sorry that I took quite a while on the introduction, but I just needed to get you to understand the new thinking of the Nigerian civil service. Now, we realize that there have been so many reforms in the past, and if you look at it starting from 1999, when the present democratic dispensation came on board, there have been about 47 reforms, and 10 specifically relate to the civil service, 47 in the overall public service, and then 10 in the civil service. And here we have the list of the 10 reforms that came under the civil service from 1999 to date. I'll just mention 2 or 3 that have been have had very far-reaching impact: the monetization, the pension reforms, the IPIS, the tenure policy, and performance management, to mention a few. Now, we've found that there have been challenges in the past why these reforms could not actually work. And we know that some of these challenges include sustainability. Once it starts, how many people are ready to move with that program or with that reform strategy? Then there's also the issue of buy-in. Like I said at the beginning, most of the reforms in the past came from outside to civil servants. This time around, we have our own homegrown reform package, which I'll soon get to. Then, of course, the issue of meritocracy, capacity, which has a lot to do with capacity, the very low capacity in the service at the time, and not enough capacity building and development. So these are some of the challenges which we have seen while going through the past, studying the past reforms. Please move to the next slide. Now, reforms globally are going on all over the world. And it's not a new thing that we have reforms here in Nigeria. We have reforms are expected to have certain attributes, bring about certain attributes in the civil service. These have been listed by the International Civil Service Effectiveness Index, and they include integrity, openness, capability, inclusiveness, staff engagement, and innovation. Now, these are all the reforms that we expect to, this is the impact we want to see on after we've started our reform process. And these reform efforts are not just in Nigeria, but all over the world. And the Insights Index has taken time to show us how the service in other countries have been moving along with their reforms. Some have been doing very well. We have here the report from Insights on about 31 countries. You can see that the United Kingdom has been doing very well in areas of tax administration, policy making, social security, and so on. But then there are certain areas that they are still working on. What I'm trying to say here is that no reform, because we're talking about the unfinished business of reforms. I want to say that reforms are never finished. They are ongoing. Wherever you have reached, you want to improve on it and move to the next level. Now, I will want to just move on to some of the levers, which maybe slide 7. Now, these I would call the transformation levers that we have tried to adopt in the civil service, because we know that it is going to be very important that if we are going to achieve the success of the reforms we have started, we need to build the capacity of our civil servants. So we are talking here about building the capacity, training and retraining, looking for talent, even if it means going into arrangements with the private sector, which we have actually started, to have some kind of exchange programs with the private sector to help us build talent. And then, of course, our performance management system. We have often talked about inefficiency in the service, and we realize that there must be a way how we can monitor performance, how people can be rewarded, that there must be consequences and rewards for good performance or poor performance. So we are looking at a totally new performance management system that has started with target setting, with performance monitoring and tracking, then with dialogue to know where the person has gone wrong, and of course, the issues of consequences. Now, the previous performance management strategies we had in the past were rather too vague and had so many criteria that in the end people were using more or less very subjective ways and means of assessing staff. But with this new system, we're developing just 3 basic criteria or targets that we expect staff in their various areas of engagement to meet up. And these targets must be based, first of all, on the overall policy thrust of government, and then the mandate of that ministry, and of course, after that, the schedule of duty of the staff. Now, working with on this new system, we will be able to track a staff's performance. And in doing this, we are also introducing automation, an automative process for this performance management system that we have brought in now. Already 140 staff across the ministries in the FCT have started the training for this new performance management system, and they are going to act as trainers. They will also be training others who will be able to develop the PMS system for each of their MDAs. Then, of course, innovation. You're talking about innovation, innovative ways of working, carrying out the duties of a civil servant to make his work more efficient, to be more time conscious, to be more effective, to look at the outcomes of his work, of the inputs and the resources that he's using. And then, of course, the total culture change. there's a totally new mindset of civil servants. Recently, we carried out a culture survey, and much to our delight, over 5,000 civil servants actually responded online and were able to disabuse the minds of people who feel that civil servants are somewhat allergic to the technology or so. Then, of course, we need data analytics, digitization, and so on. Now, you would ask that our civil service strategy and implementation plan is based on 8 priority areas, which are high impact prioritization. We've looked at those areas where we will have low hanging fruits. I'll come to that very soon. But there are 5 criteria which we know that will make this strategy of ours work. And that is, I've mentioned the high impact prioritization, then the specificity. We have worked out timelines, budgets, costs, and those who will be assigned their duties for each of these assignments, on each of these activities. Then there's a clear governance structure. There's a 3-tier governance structure, which helps us to monitor how each of the stages is being carried out. We have the first level, which is the working with the priority teams, the project management teams, and then there's the steering committee level, and then there's the presidential briefing level. I want to add here that in all these levels, we are working with both the private sector and with some of our international and local partners. Then we also have the partnerships, which I've just mentioned, and then there's the change management and communication plan, which we've started. Now, here are the 8 priority areas. The 8 priority areas we have identified with the project management teams that have already started working are capacity development, the strategic talent sourcing, performance management systems, staff welfare, culture change, innovation, and the HR management system, which is the Integrated Personnel and Payroll Information System. The HR management system of this IPIS has now been developed fully. And then the civil service automation, which, like I told you earlier, we've had issues with our record keeping, but now we are moving into automation. We expect that by the year 2020, we should be able to have achieved certain targets. We should have been able to have certain impacts, such as what we just saw the previous slide. Please just go back. No. Okay, then implementation. We are planning, what we expect to have as our outcomes are to be able to save from 60 to 120 billion naira from cleaning the HR on HR data on the IPIS, to save up to 2.5 billion from digitizing all our content, savings. We have a lot of savings because a lot of record-keeping records will be cleaned up. We should also have about 25,000 civil servants who would have been trained through the 3 training modules that we have introduced. We also have 200 leaders by the year 2020. We also are going to have 200 lead P presidential cohorts. We're developing a class of talent in the service where we identify staff, civil servants within levels 10 to 14 who could make potential leaders in the country. Then 25 of our ministries should have fully come on board on the performance management system. And we have, from next year, we'll be having 3 annual innovation challenges to cultivate ideas and technologies and ventures that will help improve the efficiency and productivity in the service. Now, can we go back to the implementation? We have started from 2017 with the approval from FEC. And here on this slide, you can see how we are going to move from finalizing the project plans. We have also finalized our budgets. The steering committees have sat, and we've started on the execution of our different projects, while also developing a monitoring and control platform. I want to say that although by the year 2020, this strategy plan says 2016 to 2020, I want to say that the process of reforms is not final, is never final. It is indeed an unfinished business, because definitely even after 2020, we will still have to continue improving on whatever we have achieved. Now, these are just pictures of our deep dive sessions. Okay, go on. Now we have our project management office. The project management office is it's developed in the form of a war room where we sit down with our various project management teams and deliberate and carry out different actions. We hold our meetings there. We also hold conference meetings. We have all the inputs, the technology that is available, and we have already been using it for different conference meetings, both nationally and internationally. As we go on, I would want to mention to you that IPIS, one of the biggest problems we've had in the service was the issue of ghost workers. And so far, we have been able to carry out a cleaning of the HR, of the personnel records on the IPIS platform for all the ministries in the FCT, which is up to about 30% of the total number of federal civil servants. So the next phase is to go nationally to do the cleanup for all other federal civil servants outside Abuja. We have also started our capacity building, and we started with DFID, and DFID has been supporting us there. I want to at this point add that we have a program that we're just about implementing with Pearl, which is also part of DFID, and that is, we are working with the Presidential Committee on the Northeast for the rehabilitation of the civil service in the Northeast. This is one area which we believe that we can start on a clean slate, applying the new strategies, the new reform policies that we have developed. Now we have partnerships both with the private sector and with international organizations. Here we have some of our partners. We have partners with the DFID, European Union, Shell, Africa Initiative for Governance, and that is Mr. Aig Mokwede, who's the chairman of AIG. We also have partnerships that we have met with those who have shown interest in coming in to work with us. Some of the names are over on that slide. Now, here are what we expect in the year 2020 and beyond. Improve staff competencies, and I'll just rush through it, my time is up. Improve staff competencies and skills, results-based performance and meritocracy, a more innovative civil service that brings innovation from within and outside the service. Then a civil service with a fresh culture, value-driven and epic civil service culture, improved productivity and governance for HR administration, and improved enterprise content management systems, that is the digitized records, automation workflow, and so have you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I know I have rushed a bit on our strategy document, but it's available. We have it in the soft copies, and definitely I know that the NESG will be very interested to have it and distribute to all participants. Thank you so much.
So Dr. Adedoju will take over from here.
Let's give the head of service another round of applause. If you want that civil service to be your civil service. Thank you very much, man. And thank you so much for the profound insight into what's going on. Many of us do not have insight into the inner workings of the reform process as it runs. We're joined on the panel by several reformers, past, present. And so what I would like to do before we deep dive, particularly responding to your ongoing reform strategy, is to maybe step back a bit and look at the theme. The theme for this evening is this question of effective public institutions, the unfinished work of reform. And the head of service said several times that reform is never finished. However, if we look at our experience as citizens of Nigeria from the cradle to the grave, our experience of civil service, of public service and services points to a huge deficit, which I think I alluded to. I guess the big question as we start is, and I will allow each of the panelists to first take a shot at this. What is this unfinished work of reforms from your experience? And what would it take? What does it take to build effective institutions from your experience? And because we have experienced reformers, I will just let them deep dive, and then we can come back and have a conversation based on that. So first, our guest from Uganda, Dr. Mrs. Jennifer Mushishi, Executive Director of the City of Kampala, has led the transformation, really incredible transformation of public services in Kampala, and before that led the Revenue Authority. I'm going to allow her to answer this question based on your experience, and then we can then come right back and take the other reformer experiences.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. I'm going to stand up so that you can see this beautiful Ugandan outfit. This is our traditional dress, and I'm very proud of it. I want it to be as famous as the Nigerian traditional dress, so I wear it as much as I can, and we're catching up now. In 2011, the government of Uganda and the Parliament of Uganda created the Kampala Capital City Authority. This is the body that administers the capital city of Uganda. The reason KCCA was created was because for the last so many decades since independence, the service delivery of the city was dysfunctional. There was everything bad about administration and governance, and the purpose was to transform the administration and also improve service delivery. The original city administration was under local government, so now this institution came in as a corporate entity under central government to do the work of administering the city. That's how I was appointed as the first executive director of Kampala by His Excellency, the President, basing on my previous experience in transforming with my colleague Alan, the Uganda Revenue Authority, which is now a leading revenue agency on the continent. What did we do? First of all, I'm so glad I was given a blank page. The president's instructions were not very complicated. He said, help me rescue Kampala. So there I went. No other instructions, no policies to benchmark on, go and transform and rescue Kampala. So what we did, we set in place, we started from scratch. There was no budget, there was no structure. I was the only staff for 1 year. There was nothing. That's how we started. So we developed a structure, an efficient structure, smaller, shorter. We also developed a new mission, vision, a new strategic plan. We developed a new basic corporate entity, even rebranded it to take people's memories away from what it was and the negatives that the city administration presented. We disengaged, the other word for firing, the entire staff team. It didn't matter whose relative you were. It didn't matter how long you had worked. We disengaged the whole team. We hired professionals, a few from the old team, but mostly new people, professionals that were coming from the corporate world, coming from other organizations, professionals that had a passion, a determination to be part of the transformation of the city as their driving force. By the way, most of them, the early ones came in without knowing whether they'd get a salary, but they had a passion to transform the city. I personally worked for a year without a salary, and it was fine because the results were making it worthwhile. So the team that we hired, very young, very energetic, very motivated professionals. The average age was about 32, and we appointed them into key positions into the institution. We applied best practice from different organizations within and outside Uganda, and in terms of planning, implementation, assessment of results, we used best practice. We did not refer to any template that was there in the past. We developed our own templates to meet the needs of the city. We used non-conventional methods of performance management, of tooling staff, encouraged innovation, and encouraged these young teams to go for it. Here's a problem, find a solution, come back to us, we'll support you. And they did just that. We provided a conducive environment, and I think my sister Winifred was talking about a conducive environment. We turned around the environment because you spend most of your time working. So we needed to improve the environment. We cleaned it up. We basically jazzed up the working environment for our teams. And so they were motivated to come and work. We gave them as much as we could in terms of IT equipment and training. Now, the service delivery began to improve almost instantly. And this was partly from the enhanced client feedback systems. We put up feedback systems. We set up online systems of feedback, client care centers. I mean, if you're talking to a generation today, you need to talk in the language they understand. So right now we have 7 social media platforms that we're using to communicate and feedback, in addition to radio and TV and press and all the traditional ones. We also had zero tolerance to corruption. I would tell my staff whenever I met them, I will support you, I will defend you, I will take the flak on your behalf for everything that you do, except when you are corrupt. If you're implicated in corruption, you're on your own. That was the message we kept on giving our staff. And if we did catch them being corrupt, it was so bad. It was so bad that the others did not want to do it. We arrested people, we put them in prison, we fired them, we put their pictures in the press. It was so bad. They didn't want to be in that boat. We, as I said, had very effective strategic communication with the public, and the results, as I said, started coming in. So in the last 7 years, our revenue has grown to just under 200% in terms of what we bring in into the city. The asset value has increased by 1,350%. Even to me, that's phenomenal. And this is through reclaiming public properties that had been illegally given away or stolen or shared out, and also acquiring other properties that we are using to, we intend to use to develop the city. We improved our financial management and accountability systems. We have been receiving for the last 4 years unqualified audit opinions. Now, those of you in government know what that means. Unqualified audit opinions means clean audit reports, not just from our Auditor General, but also from agencies like the World Bank, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and others that we partner with in the development of the city. We also got a grade A credit ranking as a city from the World Bank within the first 4 years, and a highly satisfactory ranking from the client surveys that have been done in terms of implementing World Bank projects. There was a lot of efficiency gains in service delivery, in infrastructure, in health. We provide hospitals, we do manage schools, and we build infrastructure. A lot has been done. In the last 7 years, we've built over 265 kilometers of new roads in Kampala and still counting. We, as a result of institutional credibility, we've been able to improve our development support, not just from the development partners, but also from local partners, from private sector. For the first time, I think in the history of Uganda, we have private individuals and private Ugandan companies giving us money to do projects like schools and health centers. Where have you seen that? But because we built the institution's credibility, they know if they give Jennifer money, the money will be properly utilized. We also reversed the decline on all the different indicators. We have been receiving all sorts of awards from all over the world for the work that we do. I was here in Abuja to receive an award last month, Africa Virtuous Woman Award, and then 2 weeks ago, Africa Leadership Award in New York in the sidelines of the UN conference. But all this comes from the systems, the structures, and the teams that we've built to deliver services. Now, just some thoughts as I conclude, and I'm just throwing this out to you. As we look at public sector reforms, public sector improving service delivery, improving our credibility and all the good things that we want to do, I keep thinking, as an implementer, that perhaps before policy makers and legislators come out with policies, they should first do an impact assessment, cost-benefit analysis of these policies, and then decide whether they want us, the implementers, to implement them before actually passing them. Because when you pass them and hand them to us, we will come out with results. Some may not be very pleasant, but there will be results leading to the goal that we have set. And we will want the support of the legislators and the policymakers during implementation, because sometimes the public is not very excited about some of the reforms. Because if we do selectively apply policies and if we selectively apply policies, we destroy compliance, but we also open up avenues for corruption in the system. If we have political barriers to implementation, it frustrates us, the implementers, the people that you've assigned to do the implementation. And it also destroys innovation, because people say, what's the point of doing new things that will not be implemented. Why are we using 20th century solutions in 21st century, for example? If you look at our methods of work, our systems, public service, standing orders, and all those things in very, very big, thick black and red books, why are we using them today? If they are not working, why are we using them? Why don't we look at developing systems, policies, and practices that deliver the results that we need? For example, public service. I do work with public service on staffing as part of our law, and they want a minimum age of 35. I have friends working in blue chip companies that are retiring at 35. If we're starting a career at 35 in public service, then we'll not be surprised at the results that we get. The bodies that sometimes make policies for us, the public servants, are comprised, I don't know, probably not in Nigeria, but in a lot of the rest of Africa, comprised of retired, distinguished citizens who need their grandkids to do basic things like open an email account for them. And these are the people that are making decisions for this century and the other rest of the world that we are competing with. How do we respond to modern day challenges? Using policies formulated in 1926 and 1923 and beyond. How do we deal with cybercrime and fraud and the massive information availability with solutions and policies that were made so many years ago? How will we meet the performance demands of the world today and the economies today using performance management systems developed during the colonial times? So these are things that we need to think about as we talk about reforms. Why don't we adopt tested, tried policies, methods? We know a lot of blue chip companies, a lot of successful companies like my brother Ike there. They have solutions. They have cracked the staffing issues. They have cracked the performance issues. Why do we not adopt some of these solutions and apply them rather than investing in a lot of research and studies and all sorts of things? Because if we do, then we'll get similar results. There's nothing wrong with adopting from the private sector. We've done it and we've seen the results. We spend a lot of money benchmarking, yes? Benchmarking and studies and whatever. But you'll find that many of these companies, private companies, actually have less budget than we do as government. So we could actually apply this budget to solutions. We invest a lot in education, training, skilling professionals for the public service. And in order for us as Africa to realize from that investment, we need to allow these people to function. We need to allow them to work. We need to allow them to innovate and come up with solutions that will answer our development needs as Africa. Why do we appoint very highly skilled people when we'll not let them innovate and give us solutions to our needs? We adopted best practices as KCCA, and we've seen the results. And my conclusion is that I think policymakers and legislators need to decide, what do you want? When you decide what you want, let us know what are the implementation methods, and then we shall decide whether to come on board or not, or go to the private sector. Otherwise, Africa will continue losing the heavy investment we've made in training, in educating, in building capacity in our personnel that end up going to the West that doesn't really need them anyway, because it has dynamic, predictable systems with clear result-based remuneration packages. We Africans will continue spending on traversing the world acquiring knowledge, benchmarking, telling stories of what we saw, and sitting in meetings, very expensive meetings, more expensive than even this one, discussing development and solutions and wonderful things of transformation, but Africa will only be developed by Africans. Africa can only be developed by Africans. And those Africans will only develop Africa to the extent that we allow them to develop Africa. Africans will only develop Africa to the extent that we Africans allow them to develop. Ladies and gentlemen, a week ago, I decided to resign from my position as Executive Director, Kampala, into what has, and the reasons for that have now become a subject of a lot of debate worldwide. So I did hand in my resignation to His Excellency the President, and I'll leave you with that thought. Africa can develop, we have everything it takes to develop, but we can only develop it to the extent that you, the policymakers, you, the politicians, and you, the colleague Africans, allow us to develop and transform it. Thank you very much.
Can we give her a hand? Wow, truly inspiring, and a lot of powerful lessons right there. Professor Olopa, allow me to change the direction because of time. I'm your student, and I mean, 3 of the 5 best books on public service reforms in Nigeria are written by you, and you are in our generation, the historian of public service reforms. Are we stuck? Because 40 reforms that have been initiated since 1999, when we know better, which is Jennifer's point, we know that entrepreneurial government is the way to go, moving resources from lower levels of productivity to higher levels of productivity to deliver tangible, measurable impacts that citizens can feel is the way. Are we stuck? And if we are stuck, because Head of Service described 40 plus reforms since 1999. Why are we stuck? How can we unclog, and remove the obstacles if we are stuck and get going? Because from Jennifer's conclusion, we are stuck only because we are holding ourselves back. I think your mic works. You want to stand also? Okay, just quickly.
I think the general impression, I can tell you I've painted a picture. Up to 1966, this public service worked. But the overwhelming perception today is that the crisis of governance in Nigeria is that government can't get development work done, and that public institutions are not working. Now, of course, there are clear evidences that there are successful government programs, but they are stunted by failed, abandoned, and epileptic programs. And I cannot find a better summary than the World Bank 2004 review, which said that in Africa, and this is not just Nigeria, 29% of most development programs ever get completed. 45% of ongoing projects are ever rated satisfactory, and 26% get cancelled. Let me proceed. Tyler has introduced me, but I need to, so that you know where I'm coming from. I'd always researched the public service. Throughout the 27 years that I was a civil servant, I had a fortune of leading a strategy work in education, whether Minister of Education, and in the Office of Head of Service as technical head that, developed the National Public Service Strategy. Now I'm retired. I retired as a Federal Permanent Secretary. I'm now a professor of public administration. So what are the issues? And I will address it under two themes. What are the systemic issues? And what are the Nigerian factors? We inherited a colonial public service that all of us are familiar with, whether private sector or public sector. It's a bureaucratic model. It worked very well until the 60s. And I'm talking in terms of global, generalization. But as a business model, that bureaucratic model, which you won't find in Britain or anywhere again, is strong in managing input and process, but is not strong in managing output and outcome. Because it's governed by general order, what we now call public service rule, financial regulations, and circulars. In public administration parlance, we call it one-size-fits-all model. So it is designed not to deliver service. It is not designed to deliver results and be effective. It's designed to prevent fraud and to control politicians. Again, Britain had that model, but there was a global conversation around the world up to 1968 when Britain then reformed its own. And we had the opportunity to reform and create the basis of that reform with the Udoji reform of 1974. And what did the Udoji say we should do? He said we should begin to imbibe strategic planning, competency-based human resource management managed by professionals, project management framework that are underpinned by performance management system and monitoring and evaluation framework. And of course, performance contracting, and I can go on and on. But unfortunately, because of the oil boom, we didn't implement. What did we implement? We implemented the Udoji Bonanza. And what the Udoji Bonanza did was that it raised the income level of the public sector to a very high level. But unfortunately, the oil revenue began to go down almost before the end of a decade. So what happened? And I need to answer high issue now under investment in the public service. Now, what happened was between 1966 and 1970, Nigeria regional structure multiplied from 4 to 12, later 19, later 21, and now 36. Now, what's the federal civil service, in terms of institutional expansion, increased by 600% from what it was in 1966. So what that meant was that immediately the resources were declining, and we entered the austerity measure of Obasanjo in his first coming, and later the structural adjustment. We needed to do institutional rationalization. But unfortunately, in the era of the military, the labor union got very powerful. They got peripheral and adversarial. And so every government dodged, right-sizing the public service. So what the military were doing was that they were now sidetracking the public service, and they were creating structures to implement their policies. So that also expanded the public service, created parallel structures. Then they stopped really training civil servants. They saw that if they needed to reform the pay structure, it was going to be very expensive. But on top of all that, by 1999, 70% of federal expenditure was going into overhead. So within that structure, you could only continue to neglect the public service. You could only continue not to have money for reform. For training and all of that. So what structural adjustment now did was to compound the dynamics. There was a spirited desire to achieve change quickly by implanting innovation and best practice over a base fundamental of bureaucratic model that were not reformed. So they were standing on no foundation. Dr. Phillips started target setting, efficiency, scrutiny, and all of that, which is those are elements of performance management. Then he wanted to realign the public service to fit presidential assistant and politicize the office of the permanent secretary. And what that did was turnover rates at the high level of the civil service increased so dramatically, a lot of talents were wasted. So this is the situation that we have. Now there is over-reliance because the skill and IQ of the service has gone down. There is heavy reliance on private sector consultants whose understanding of the chemistry of the public service also needs to be tempered so that through action research, which is not going on in the public service, and of course, the fact that. So in terms of going forward, and summary, I want to suggest the strategy of the head of service with the technical support of ERGP is excellent. But I'll tell you in terms of framework, it's a reformulation of all the reforms that we know. But it has updated what exists. There are two things that need to happen. One, we need to get the basics of the public service right. Let me tell you, as an insider, that except for a few agencies that had reformers who really utilized knowledge to call what in the literature we now call pocket of effectiveness here and there. What Akwili did in, again, whether there was a system, what Ifueko did in Federal Revenue, CBN, but in the mainstream civil service, there are still issues. So we need to do a functional review and basic housekeeping to re-establish the basic management system in each MDA. The truth of the matter is that no MDA has, in a technical sense, what you may call a management system that will make it to respond to the need to implement strategy or change. Two, MDA's businesses and operations needs to be aligned to a sector strategy. What we have now is that ministries have sector strategy that are being implemented, but the software of the operation of the public service are not so aligned. Then we need to do a capability review of all the public services in order to look at the structural hindrances that have been hindering their performances. Those are basic things that need to be sorted before you start to do systemic changes. And lastly, you need to do productivity audits, because a lot of processes, a lot of expenditure heads are in the MDAs that really makes a lot of the MDA head of service. When I was essay to Alaji Yalian, I did a small study, and I discovered that the then head of service office was majoring in minor. Most of his funds are going into staff boss, but his core functions are never funded. So, effectively, such such an agency cannot function. So, but in terms of systemic changes, we need to change the business model of most NDAs. They are still run on a bureaucratic model. And there will be a need for a macroeconomic statement that defines, we have never defined the role of the state. We say private sector is the engine room. We say we are adopting PPP. But what is the role of the state? Is the Federal Ministry of Education supposed to be running federal government like a unit? This is a business that needs to be run properly using business model. So each ministry needs to face its core function, and the non-core function, there are so many models: outsourcing, lease contracting, management contracting, that could deliver on them. We need to increase the IQ of each MDA. And that will require a workforce study of each MDA to determine what skills they have and the skill gap. You can do all the training packages, competency framework, competency catalog. But if you do not know the skills that you have and decide on what to do with those that you do not need, because the point of the matter is that because of the nature of politics that Nigeria plays, there is more tendency to mixing politics in the recruitment than to build a profession. So we need to rethink the intellectual base of skill set before we then develop training. We need to do the hub of intelligence for effectiveness of each MDA has some core cadres, like PRS, Planning, Research and Statistics. Planning, Research and Statistics is an innovation, but they are not professional. The only thing that is active is a tender session. So we need to have human resource management is not something that can be managed with generic skills again. It has core competencies. We need to build professional HR managers in the public service who are properly certificated to run that system. We need to do a systematic injection of skills into the public service. They won't learn by training alone. They need to be coached, they need to be mentored. So through some staff exchange, sabbatical, and all of that, you can do a lot of that. But the real thing that must happen is that there must be job evaluation, comprehensive manning level analysis to regrade the entire federal jobs. But that is if you have suffered the wastage. Then, if the labor union that we have now is still the labor union you have, then you have to learn the trick from Margaret Thatcher. I mean, certainly the labor union needs to sit down. There needs to be a talk of the tripartite. How do we move this nation forward? We cannot be protecting federal officers who we know bought the certificate in the market. You know what I mean? You say you want to revise pay. To be paying who? What skills are you paying for? What competencies are you paying for? And those are the issues that needs to be. Unnecessary reform, rationalization is even too small for the rationalization that needs to happen. We need to do a couple of other structural changes. But more importantly, we need a culture change program in the public service. And I will end with that culture change. Again, you can see that I'm mixing being a civil servant and being a professor of public administration. So if you permit me, culture change requires a shift from the culture of seeing performance as loyalty and compliance to being tasked, measurable results and productivity. We need to get the public servant to shift, or the public service to shift their understanding of skills and competencies from basic degrees that you earn and seniority to professionalism as a vocation undergirded by professional body accreditation, certification, code of practice, and mechanism for enforcing ethics. We need to implement a culture change with emphasis on winning the heart and the mind, as well as the commitment, public spiritedness, and enthusiasm of the public servant, rather than the struggle to simply change structures. I thank you.
Okay. Now, that was so that was amazing. The short of amazing. I have nothing to add to that. Okay, so if we're going, I'm your fan. Okay, so I was a fan in the private sector. When I heard she was going to government, I wept. But 10 years into it, I thought to myself, who else would we have sent to do such a job? So, to be honest, I would like you to speak as a reformer, because sometimes it's easy to sit outside government and tell everybody what to go and do in government and the changes to make and make it work and tell them. But you went into an institution that needed to be transformed and changed. And so I would like you to talk to us of the unfinished work of reform from your role as a reformer for 10 years. Okay, and then pull out lessons for reformers or would-be reformers that may be sitting here. And then I will let you, let each person have some 1-minute closing. We're out of time already by everybody waving hands at me. So what we'll do is try and go and take some questions, because I can see people ready to raise some questions. No, okay. So if we're going, you have the floor. So you have the floor, and then matching orders. I will give you 5. See, you've not said anything.
10.
Yes. 10. I've been given only 5 up here.
10.
Time Master, can you raise this, please?
Thank you very much. You say 10, but all the things you said I should talk about could take 30 or even more. But I'll try and squeeze what I can into the few minutes. And of course, perhaps you give me the grace to even speak more. First of all, I'd like to note that I agree with everything that has been said. Listening to the Uganda example, in fact, I think we just spoke on the side that a lot of everything that a lot of what she spoke about is really what we've all done, either in the public service or in the private service, if you really want to achieve results. She spoke, for example, about rebranding. She spoke about starting having a new ethos, talked about capacity building, talked about creating teams, creating ownership, and I really must commend you for all the work that you've done. And please, let's give her another round of applause. Now, bringing it to FRS, let me just add the dimensions to which we did change. First of all, just like she said, the luck I had, and I say luck because reformers need luck. Luck of timing. It was good timing for me. I needed to transition, and I was looking for that kind of challenge, even though I didn't know FRS would be that challenge. And I remember when I was leaving, people said, "Why are you going to FRS?" In fact, I probably wasn't the first person that was approached. I later found out one of the first people that was approached before me looked at FRS and said, no, she didn't want to be part of that process. So, timing is very important. Two, sometimes, certain things happen for a reason. We take it for granted. But if I look at where FRS was at the time and the competencies that I had from having been a chartered accountant, worked in tax, worked in strategy environment with quite a lot of organizations, transforming them in the private sector, working in change management, and the timing, it was almost as if it kind of worked out at that time, that I had the skills at that time and the team to support me to provide that. And I believe reformers need it. And I say this because perhaps there are certain reform jobs, I look at myself and the timing, and I say to myself, no, I'm not ready for this, and somebody else would actually be better. So it's very important that we get that right, and perhaps that's where the selection of the reformer comes in. The other thing I also like to talk about beyond timing and reform is and I guess timing is linked to it, is that you shouldn't be alone. And I say alone in a context. I went into FRS alone, but I wasn't alone in the sense that, first of all, I was interviewed by the president to take the job. And so going into the job, I had the president's backing. That is very important. I had the Minister of Finance's backing. Imagine you're transforming FRS from being a part of the ministry to being an agency that was autonomous or semi-autonomous. You need the support of the Ministry of Finance. You need the minister, because the minister that goes to EXCO, you need the minister to take that change that you're proposing to EXCO, to believe it, to sell it, and pass it on to legislators for law. If you don't have that, it makes it even more difficult. So that support team is important. And in terms of timing, I had a predecessor who had started the journey. So I was in the beginning of the reform process. That is also very important. Now, what is important in that, I believe, is not so much that you didn't have reform, because I believe in all our instances, there will be somebody that you've taken over from that has done something good or not, something good in the process. But I believe that recognizing the strength of your predecessor, I think also helps. Because for me, going into the job, I had never worked in the public service before, so it was new. The only people I could relate on were my parents, who were both public servants. But to be able to drive a public service institution, I needed to rely on those who had run it before. And so that started my discussions with all prior executive chairman of the FRS to just find out from their point of view what were the issues. The other advantage I also had was that the president had inaugurated a study review of the tax system, and that had gone on for 1 year, and there was a report that was given to me to say, you know what, you have a blank check to do what you want, but we've done this study for you, so go ahead and implement. So in terms of timing and in terms of what had happened before, it was almost like ready, set, and let's go. Now, even though I say this, I guess going back to the issue of reform, what helped, and like you rightly said, from the point of view of the reformer, I like to say that one thing that helped beyond the setting, which I've just described, is the fact that in looking at reforms, one looked at it less from a technician's point of view and more from a change point of view. Looking at it less from an administrative point of view, but looking at it from a holistic point of view, because they are all linked. And what do I talk about holistic point of view in the tax sense? There was a policy angle, so that way stakeholders understood we were all together and aligned in that reform, and there was a policy that was driving the change. Legislative point of view, we had laws that needed to change to give meaning to the changes that we needed. So we had put, I think at one go, about 9 pieces of legislation to change. We're able to succeed with passing on 5 pieces of legislation. And one of the pieces of legislation was a critical tool for changing the Federal Inland Revenue Service, and that's the Federal Inland Revenue Service Establishment Act. It's very important that some of the things that we're doing are entrenched in those things that will be sustainable beyond when you're around. That's also very important. And then the third leg of it was the administrative part. Now, to put the complexities in mind, FRS then, because some of us may not actually recall then, I'm talking of 2004. FRS then in 36 states of the Federation in an FCT, so we're basically talking about 37 points. And within each of those states, we had income tax offices, some of you will not remember. We had VAT offices, we had withholding tax offices, we had stamp duty offices within each state. And that was the entry point. And we're all part of the public and the civil service setting. So going round, which is one of the very first things that was done, and I was mentioning this in a pre-discussion we had, the thing that first struck me was how, not just in terms of what I saw, but what I felt, how the people of the service were neglected. And it was therefore important that beyond the strategy we're putting in place, beyond the targets we said we were going to triple revenues, and the highest we got was 5 trillion by the time we was leaving, and we went beyond the targets we set, but beyond what I'll call the mechanics of reform, was to put at the heart of reform the importance of people. And when I say people, it's not people just from the point of view of raising salary. We did that. It's not point of people from the point of view of raising conditions of service. We did that. But it was people also from the point of view of clarifying their roles and their responsibilities. So we had structures, we had to redo the structures, we had to ensure that people knew what they were doing, we did the audits you're talking about, we did the competency frameworks, we assigned roles and responsibilities. It sounds very banal, but very important for people to feel that they were a part of the system. When you are idle and you have nothing to do, it's probably when you realize how important it is to even give people something to do and that they have some ownership about. You found in the service a lot of people didn't have that. Also, the issue of recognition, recognizing them as human beings. I remember sessions we had where people would say, because one of the things we did was to even put in place a dress code. And somebody came to say to me, "Madam, you want us to dress properly?" I said, "Yes, that you are a professional. We need to dress like professionals." He said, "Madam, you are different. Oh. You know, before, if we dress properly, they'll be calling us thieves. That you've stolen all the money in the service. And so because of that, we wear our tattered shoes and tattered slippers. And so as simple as your dressing affects the way you think, affects the way you relate to the people you're operating in, but the kinds of things we also did. Then there was also the promotion system. There was a whole backlog of promotion. But it wasn't even just about promoting. It was about putting a process of promotions that people could feel that was fair. And so we now actually started online testing, where we got external people, so that we at the very minimum, you need to pass certain things, and then beyond that, we put an interview process in place. Then there was also the issue of discipline. One of the easiest things to do, for example, is to say, set targets, we want everybody to appraise, but it's probably one of the most difficult. And this is not just because one is reforming the service. As a culture, we do not want to be the one to tell the other person that you are not doing well. Not be me, make a lose job. So how do we battle that? Those were also issues that we needed to face. But what was important in facing those issues and the dialogue that we had in talking to people was that the issue of appraisal is actually for your good. And even if you are, and you tied it also to training. So for the first time, we had people from the lowest level to the highest level going for training. So when we talk about it being people-centered, it goes beyond salary, wages. It's about dignity. It's about productivity, and it's also about showing people you cared. Now, I'm saying all this, and it sounds so very simple. But believe me, putting the heart of the reformer, it wasn't simple. I remember when we first of all went around talking about the changes, we got support from stakeholders. When the law was passed, the fight began. Oh, you mean the law actually got passed? Then all kinds of heads turned up. So being a reformer is not easy. You have to go in with your sleeves rolled up. It's not something that just happens. You have to have the will, the heart, and the time to put into reforms. People will tell you that, and you will ask, that we'll stay doing our reforms 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., all in the game. So it's not easy. But it's also important to realize that if you're coming from a different sector, there is no difference between your sector and the public sector. None. The only difference is the magnitude, the only difference is the complexity, but you are dealing with human beings. And I like to just keep on re-emphasizing that over and over again. And I say that because I believe the reformer, first of all, should be aligned to the circumstances of the reforms that are needed at that particular point in time. I may be an excellent person for A organization, but the same I may not be the right person for a B organization. So it's important that we get that selection process of who the reformer is right in the time that is required. It's important that the reformer is people-oriented, particularly when we're talking about reforming public service. Service is not done by some mechanical being out there. Service is done by people, and it's people first, and then service results. It's important also that the reformer, and I think I won't re-emphasize that, is competent, but I think it's also important that you lead by example. So for example, one of the signals I believe I gave in putting in place systems within the service was to say that I wasn't going to get involved in procurement. And therefore, as far as procurement goes, the system was what was going to sort it out. And the only involvement I was going to get in procurement was if there was a problem. Because I was away from it, you had people therefore come in if they had problems, if they had questions. And that is why till tomorrow, there's actually nothing more fulfilling than a situation where you see somebody walking into a lift, stops you and said, "Madam, you know I won a contract from you from the email that I sent, and I was part of the process, and I worked and I knew nobody." I don't think people realize how fulfilling that whole experience is. And it's something that I really would urge reformers to do. Now, but one thing I like to tell reformers, you have to stay long to reform. Hold your job. Sounds very interesting, but sometimes in the course of reform, you may not last long. And for me, the starting point for reform is to stay on that job. So what does that mean? It means that as you step into that field, and it's a minefield of things you do not know are going to pop up, you need to have your eyes in all kinds of angles. And you need to have other people's eyes also watching out for you. Because even though you may go in alone, you cannot be alone. I remember certain times when somebody would walk into my office, I had no clue of who that person was. And they say, "I received this letter." And I look at the letter, I didn't know the letter was even written. It was designed to incense the media. The guy said he was in a discussion on media practitioners, and they were all going to blast me on the front pages, say I must go. And he looked at it and said, "But madam could not have written this. The madam I have heard about, let me go and check." That's what saved me that day from some. That doesn't mean some other media things did not happen. But those things help. But please stay on your job. Now, by staying on your job, it's also the fact that reform is not something that will happen overnight. It's a long-term thing. And I'm listening to the head of services plan, and I like the issues that have been raised in the plan. My concern is the 3 years, but I can relate to why it was 3 years. But after 3 years, you're still going to be unfinished business. Like you rightly said, it's a continuous process. So it's going to take time. Now, if you do not happen to therefore stay on the job long enough to see it through to a point, then the other issue then becomes, how are you planning for succession? Because that's also something that sometimes we do not do as well as we should. But unfortunately, in the public service, it may not even be yours to do. And therefore, thinking through it in the most creative ways, who knows, there may be, when you do the innovation challenge, there may be ideas that may pop up of how to ensure that there's continuity. One is law. Law helps, because one thing that stays true is what is enshrined in law. And there may be other things that will help, but that movement from one person to the other and ensuring that it continues moving up is very, very important. But again, like I said, what advice do I give reformers? If you happen to be taking the mantle from someone who has been doing something before, please, my advice is talk to that person. Don't think the person is APC government, PDP government, ABGA government. It doesn't matter. Don't look at the person is not from my place. It doesn't matter. Guess who gets the credit? You do. Guess who moves faster because you have taken off from where somebody has stopped? You do. So please, let's leave the ego behind to say, who am I to talk to this person? I can do it myself. Because it slows you down. Pull people who have done things before. You can avoid their mistakes. I made several mistakes. I can share them. We experimented a lot before I can tell you some of the things we are doing today. There were parts we were going through, we had to retract and go through another path. So why go through the same process yourself? The more you learn from others, the better and faster you are in the reform process. Some other things I'd like to quickly touch on and then stop for questions is reforms need to be funded. Let's not take it for granted. When we're talking about building a better work environment, going round, imagine a tax office where you're seeing the officer and the roofs have caved in, and you want that officer to meet targets. Even if you pay the guy 1 billion naira, and he enters an office and the roofs are caving in, how will his mindset be and his morale? What signal are you sending that person? So you have to repair the infrastructure. You have to build offices. You have to paint. You have to make the place look like somewhere you want to go to work in. That costs money. The other thing about reforms that's important to bear in mind is how we allocate resources. Because one thing is the funding. The other is, and I think that's what Solako was talking about, allocate the resources to where you get the most value. And also bear in mind that there are certain mindsets that have driven certain ways resources are allocated. Because people do not feel cared for, because people feel that nobody cares for them, so they will put money in buses because that's where they can make some money. They put money in training because that's where they can get ESTA code. The real issue of training is not to build capacity, it's to add more money to their pocket. But don't look at it as a problem. Don't label them, because that is what happens. Understand why it is done, and then solve the root problem and change the behavior. It's very important that we do that. Capacity building is extremely important. Sometimes reformers, when they take over, they no longer build capacity. And when we talk about capacity, let me talk a little bit about that. Capacity is not just about going to a school or going to a workshop. For those of us who schooled, who went to advancing, I see some of us there, the best capacity we got was from our supervisor, revising our work. supervising what we're doing, mentoring, coaching, better than any training, classroom training you do in 3 days. 3 days can help, but what happens after the 3 days? So let's not look at capacity building from the point of view of just training. So how did we approach capacity building? We approached it by the organization structure. We approached it by, for example, a clear policy that we will be the ones to do the tax work, not tax consultants. Because if you do not make mistakes, if you do not improve on what you have done, you don't learn. If you do not, so it was a balance between, yes, we have a target to generate revenue, but we also have a target to build the capacity of our people. We approach capacity building from giving people positions. If you do not give people positions of responsibility and empower them to discharge those responsibilities, then they will never have tried and been able to be tested to know whether they can do it or not. We approached capacity building when it came to the transition from the old to the new. We didn't just disengage staff. I think that's where we differed from Uganda. What we did was we set minimum criteria for getting into the new FRS. And then we found out that close to 2,500, 3,000 people did not meet that criteria. So we said we'll fund those who were ready to go back to school. And we gave them a 3-year period within which to go back to school. Today, I still receive texts from people who have either retired or they are still in the service who say the only reason they were able to improve their lives was because of that opportunity for them to go back to school. So let me end by saying the reformer should please bear in mind that the space you are reforming in an institution is for a limited period of time. But when you are reforming the minds of people, it's for eternity. There is nothing more fulfilling than helping people grow, even after you have left office. Thank you.
Amazing lessons in reform. Let's give, if I can, another hand of applause. Okay, we are really out of time. I would like to take 2 questions. Is that okay? And then move. Are there any questions? So everybody has had a great time, I guess. Okay, so 1. I think that is it. Usher, can you rush your mic over? Sir, you have just 1 minute to ask your question.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Comrade Leo Imoka from Anambra State, Ministry of Economic Planning. I'm Permanent Secretary. The question goes to Madam from Mushishi, is it? Kampala. Yes.
Musisi.
Yes. Musisi, okay. You said you have to disengage everybody and start afresh. Did you pay the compensation kind of,
Okay, fine.
Then we are talking about Kampala. Is Kampala all about Uganda? Or you concentrated in Kampala, in building your structures and everything. So I don't know whether you just concentrated you are Eldorado in Kampala, and left the other part of Uganda.
That's the question. Yeah.
Okay, that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kampala, as the capital city, is a creation of the law. So the law sets out the parameters that Kampala covers, and the jurisdiction of Kampala is separate in terms of the law and administration. That is what Parliament passed. So there is a law for the administration of Kampala City.
Thank you.
And that's what I am responsible for. Under that law, there was a provision to create a new corporate entity, to build a new corporate entity. There is a provision to recruit new staff, and that staff include old staff that qualify, that will sit the interviews that are put out based on the new structure, the job roles, the job roles that were put in the new structure. So people who passed came in through a competitive system most of the time, and others came in out of the expertise that was headhunted by the system to bring experts in. So they had a chance to come in through interviews. Yes, there was a disengagement package that people got paid, terminal benefits.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will let Head of Service have one last word. Then I will allow Ike to close out this session, possibly charge and inspire business a little bit more, I think, because these reformers can't do this alone. There is a sense in which they require all our support. So maybe to the Head of Service first. Head of Service, is your mic there working? So allow them to have the two last words, and then.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to conclude by saying that I do agree with Ifweko that reforms need to be well timed, and I believe that the timing is right for the civil service reforms we're talking about now, because there is total buy-in of a large percentage of civil servants. And again, I want to say that a number of the issues raised by Dr. Olaokpa are already being addressed by the strategy. For example, the issue of fake certificates. The screening we did revealed a lot of issues which I wouldn't make public. Some of the culprits are already being prosecuted. So I think maybe Dr. Olaokpa could meet with us and we would be able to give him updates, because he probably is still looking at the service he left behind a couple of years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rapporteur, Moderator, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I have really enjoyed this session, and I believe that the NESG, the organizers of this summit, and indeed the institution that I spent so much time with, the Africa Initiative for Governance, which I founded, have seen the good cause and the reason why this plenary is mission critical for Nigeria. Now, let me tell you something. I'm now speaking to the private sector. I'm going to come back very briefly to the public sector. You are as vested in this reform process as any stakeholder is in this country, probably more so. Because the irony is, in a developing country, at the level of Nigeria's development, public policy has a much greater power and effect on our dreams and aspirations than an advanced country. where institutions are very well entrenched, systems are very well tested, and that's why they are called advanced. Part of my reason for throwing everything I have into this effort is the fact that with the stroke of a pen, a public servant can end your dream, however well thought through. And I've experienced it as many people here have. But is he the enemy? I'm not sure. If we put in charge of issues that concern trillions of naira of GDP, somebody who is not an Ifreco, is not a Winifredo Yota, is not a Jennifer Msisi, is not a Professor Olakwa. We don't care where they came from. We don't care how they've been trained. We don't care how they've been developed. And yet, our dreams, our ambitions are subject to their policy decisions. You are the one causing yourself great pain. And that's why we are vested. And so we cannot sit back. It's not an alternative. The idea of sitting back or being in that middle, 60% or 80% in the middle, waiting for the outcome of the war between the good people and those who are doing bad. No. We have to join the reformers in one way or the other and help them win a war that we are the beneficiaries of. That's the first point I want to make. How do you join this war? Reformers all over the place. A head of service who has embarked on a bold reform to address the 100,000 people in the civil service who, by the way, are the most powerful of all the public servants. Clearly, they need help. Funding, if we could spoke about, experience, and so on. Bring your talents, bring your ideas, bring your funding to help that which she's doing. And there are structures by which to do so. We assisted in funding the refinement of the plan documents, and it was significant. But I think that it's a small sacrifice to pay for the benefit that comes from it. Together we went on a roadshow to the private sector, many of whom are in this room now, and we were thrilled and excited by the response that the civil service received. We will be coming to you under the auspices of the Economic Summit group and see how you will join this journey to make Nigeria a much greater place. That Nigeria that we want, where there's electricity all the time and things work as they should work. But then also to those in the public service, because they are here, and the Economic Summit group process is a partnership between the private sector and the public sector. Do not be afraid to embrace us. We are both vested in the same objective. So, just as Madam has done with our initiative and with other bodies, I do hope that several other public sector institutions will commence the reform process in partnership with the private sector. Thank you so much. I wish we could have taken some more questions, but in the interest of time, we need to close. Maybe, Aswe, you said that it's not only until a summit that the Nigerian Economic Summit group works. Maybe there's an argument here for a process within a process to commence focused on governance. We don't have to wait for the next summit to do some great things together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will hand over to the Master of Ceremonies. Thank you, distinguished panelists.
Thank you very much. I'd like to invite the chairman to please step up here and join them for the group photograph very quickly.